Shocking news just before today's Fed FOMC meeting. The Fed is on the verge of changing its mandate and is planning to implement yield curve control. This was confirmed, among others, by Arthur Hayes, who believes this will send Bitcoin soaring to $1 million US. That's absolutely wild. This is what we've been waiting for. The US central bank will probably never be the same as we know it. We're witnessing a major turning point here. The Federal Reserve's mandate is simply being changed here, and the whole thing is being confirmed by a Bitcoiner who's now inside the Federal Reserve, Stephen Miran. This is so crazy, guys. Plus, Tomley says we're about to see a monster move. There are new Bitcoin and crypto laws in the US. In France, the situation is escalating more and more, and now TV reporters are going live on air telling citizens in France that Bitcoin could be the solution here. The system is collapsing. By Bitcoin now. We also have the Trump family, who are now actually listed on the Nasdaq with their next Bitcoin venture. The Bitcoin price is holding steady here at over 117,000 US. Let's go. Are we about to see the next all-time highs? For that, I'd like to ask you to take a moment of your time. I'm putting in a lot of effort here, so I'd be really grateful if you could take a second to hit the like button below for higher Bitcoin prices, peace, and freedom, so this knowledge can reach even more people. As a thank you, I'll even show you my used dirty socks here. They're really worn out, with 2 holes, 1 hole here, and here's another hole. Yeah, just take a look at that. If that's not bullish, I don't know what is. By the way, this is a lucky sock, so you're probably going to have a really awesome day today. Just saying, by the way. Then we've got some massive moves here. If Bitcoin ends September at its current price level, with a rise of 7.5%, it would be the best September in the last 13 years. Is this a sign of a wild October ahead this year? I mean, 7% is still pretty slim, of course, but for September, which has historically always been worse, with lots of down periods, it's actually not that bad. Here we see the Trumps now with American Bitcoin on the Nasdaq. There were even videos yesterday of them celebrating here. I always say it. Look at the incentives. Which big players are supporting Bitcoin here? Which ones are fighting against it? Right now, we have way more people in the bull camp than people still fighting against it. Sure, there are still a few, like some central banks and so on. But it's like with the dinosaurs and all that. Eventually, they'll die out too, and then there will only be Bitcoin left. Here's an example. This is a wild story too. Paulo Arduino just posted earlier that his company has a 99% margin, the most profitable company per employee in the whole world, and he has 100% of his crypto portfolio in Bitcoin. That's definitely very interesting. And we'll also take a look at what's going on with the Fed, because that's really wild. This could mean another huge push for Bitcoin. And Tomley also talks about why this could trigger a monster move. Arthur Hayes has a take on this. But before we get to that, we actually discussed it here yesterday. I posted it on X earlier, because I was having a bit of a discussion with some students. I thought it was an interesting discussion. When you're a student, you have the problem that the Bitcoin price is rising faster than you can actually earn money. I mean, you have opportunity costs. You spend 5, 6, 7 years studying. During that time, you earn relatively little. They all earn almost nothing, couldn't save anything. And then the discussion came up. Should we use our BAFC loan or a consumer loan to go all in on Bitcoin? I actually know a few people who put their BAFC loan into Bitcoin. That decision didn't turn out so badly. But of course, this is not financial advice. But I'd be interested to hear your take on this. Is it better not to HODL Bitcoin at all or just a tiny bit and focus on studying? Or should you take out a BAFC loan, put it all into Bitcoin, and maybe get a little head start? Let me know in the comments below. And now we actually have a really wild story. After Fed board member Miran was confirmed, the mainstream media are preparing the world for the Fed's third mandate, which is essentially about controlling the yield curve. Let's fucking go. Arthur Hayes says here, $1 million Bitcoin is coming. And it's just insane what's being reported here. So, we have Stephen Miran, who is now on the Fed board and will already be deciding tonight whether interest rates go up or down. And he's actually putting forward the thesis that the Fed should fulfill its first mandate, price stability, the second, full employment, and now a third mandate, which is to keep long-term government bonds, so the long end, under control as well. Here it says moderate long-term interest rates, meaning that they also have the long-term rates under control at the long end. And that's nothing other than yield curve control. That means, on the short end, they manually lower the key interest rate, and on the long end, they buy US government bonds because otherwise there are no more buyers in the market. And that's nothing other than QE, quantitative easing. And we've always seen that when this was started, Bitcoin absolutely skyrocketed. And guys, if they're already discussing this, I can tell you one thing. Donald Trump already knows exactly that he wants to implement this tool. He's now lining up the Fed people so that this can be done sooner or later. He also wants to replace the current Fed chair and so on. And Stephen Moran is also someone from Trump's inner circle and so on. So that would really be the ultimate scenario. Then Bitcoin could shoot up to 1 million or something like that really fast. So I think Alpha Hayes is definitely right here when he says this will catapult Bitcoin to 1 million. Let's quickly check out what Tomley has to say about this. He also has a really Really interesting take on this. Talking about a monster move that's coming our way.
Bitcoin and Ethereum, I think they could make a monster move in the next 3 months, like huge.
If we were to say Ethereum, Bitcoin, we try to bucket them into risk-averse assets or risk-on type assets.
Yeah.
Is it fair to look at them that way? We used to compare them correlation-wise to the NASDAQ 100. Is that the fair assessment for how these things trade in the coming months?
Yes. Bitcoin is particularly monetary policy liquidity sensitive. Ethereum has elements of being sensitive to liquidity, but it's also part of this AI moving onto the blockchain and Wall Street moving onto the blockchain and that whole stablecoin ChatGPT moment for crypto. So Ethereum, I think, trades almost like 1971 Wall Street, which was the dollar went off the gold standard, a lot of innovation. Ethereum essentially is a growth protocol, and that's why Bitmine is so aggressively acquiring Ethereum.
He says we're on the verge of a monster movement, a mega move, and here he's talking about Bitcoin. Here he's talking about Ethereum. You know, I always say, focus on Bitcoin here. Don't pay too much attention to all the other coins. If you want to gamble a little, go ahead. But in the long run, you should really make sure to keep your focus on Bitcoin. But he makes it very clear. Bitcoin is extremely sensitive to the whole Fed situation, to all the liquidity. And do you know what will bring mega liquidity into the market? Exactly this, what Arthur Hayes is talking about. Exactly this, where he's talking about Steve Miron. And you can already see it in the ticker. Hey, here, Fed third mandate forces bond traders to rethink age-old rules, because the old rules in the bond market are now being rewritten when suddenly the Federal Reserve, the US central bank, starts buying up everything. That's basically what they've been doing in Japan for decades. Not China, but Japan. Just having the central bank buy up all the government bonds, everything that's out there. Then you end up with a debt ratio of more than 300% or something like that. Or just under 300% compared to the gross domestic product here in China. So, really crazy. And what's even crazier, it's not just in the US, not just in Japan where things are escalating. It's escalating even more in France. Or, well, what does even more really mean? I don't even know where it's escalating the most anymore. But honestly, you can hardly tell the difference where it's the worst. And now, it's actually on French television. And no joke, they're talking about how the currency is currently losing all its value. The currency is absolutely losing its value. And that Bitcoin is the future. So you might as well accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. Quote from the TV, guys, we're really mainstream now. And I've always predicted this. We could see a massive surge in adoption if all these fiat systems start to collapse. I mean, I'm not wishing that on anyone or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm sitting here thinking, hey, hopefully the system collapses. No, of course that would mean a lot of pain for a lot of people. Of course, that's not something you'd wish on anyone. It's actually the exact opposite. But you just have to look at it objectively. If the fiat money system collapses, people will turn to Bitcoin. And often, that's just how it is. You need some pain. You need some kind of trigger to start thinking differently. Here it also says, the interest of the United States of America is undoubtedly to devalue the dollar. So it's not just in France that money is supposed to be devalued, but also in the USA. And here, you should really start thinking about accumulating Bitcoin. How intense. Yeah, there's just no stopping it anymore. The debt train has completely left the station, and at the same time, we're seeing new legislation in the USA. The United States House of Representatives has just voted to combine the bills on Bitcoin and crypto market structure with the law against central bank digital currencies. This important action is bringing us one significant step closer, maybe even to a future where we are buying Bitcoin right here. I don't know. I tried to get a bit of insight into what the law is about. There was an assessment from Elena Tourette about what this means. That's interesting. Do you remember how the House of Representatives voted in July not to include the anti-CBDC bill in the Clarity Act, but instead to add it to the defense budget? Now, they just voted to retroactively reintegrate it into the Clarity Act here, before it gets forwarded to the Senate. I asked a few sources in Congress whether this was a big deal. Now, pay attention. The general response was that it doesn't really change anything, since the Senate is already working on its own bill that includes anti-CBDC language, a spokesperson for the chair, blah blah blah, and so on and so forth. Now everything is being combined, and then there's a bit of chatter about it. We are ready to work together with Chairman Scott Bass and Senator Lummis to find a way to implement both provisions. So, long story short, in the end, nothing really changes, and the US is still against CBDCs and pro-Bitcoin. Although, I always have to say, and I've said this before, that the anti-CBDC law is kind of a smokescreen in my opinion, because you also have stablecoins, and stablecoins are kind of like a CBDC light, or some would even say they're on the same level as a CBDC. So, in the end, it doesn't really matter whether the CBDC is introduced publicly like in the EU, or if it's done in the US more through private hands, like a sort of public-private partnership. and then the state just ends up controlling the CBDC issuers anyway. Now there's also the new Teller stablecoin, USAT. And then I've got another awesome story for you. I got a message here. I won't reveal any names, but someone actually wrote, "Hey Mark, crazy thing. I've been watching you since about April or May, and since then, I've been getting more and more into it, bit by bit. We're always in a learning process, but thanks to you, I've made such a huge leap ahead. Signed the broker contract for the house today, sold it. Just wanted to say thanks real quick. Otherwise, we probably would have kept heading down a dead end." So that was some really crazy feedback, of course. I mean, obviously, none of this is financial advice. You need to know that. You make your own decisions. You are your own, I'd say, self-empowered people. I'm just sharing different perspectives here, which of course you can also question critically. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. House sold. And now, of course, the big question is, what do you do with it? Very, very likely, I assume, is to buy Bitcoin, especially if you now have a bit more flexibility. And yeah, feedback like that is always really, really wild. So thank you for that as well. We really are an awesome community. I always read the comments too. I also try to reply a lot. I can't always manage to comment on everything, as they say, but I do my best. And these aren't fake comments either. I really look at them myself and write back personally. And I also notice that you have more questions. And sometimes I manage to answer them, but not always. So let me know in the comments below how you see the current situation here. Have you sold your house? Or do you still have it? Do you still have socks without holes? Or do your socks already look like this too? And if you're still looking for the best place to manage your Bitcoin, safe from hacker attacks, theft, and so on, then I always recommend taking your Bitcoin off the exchanges, just to eliminate third-party risks. Get yourself a TREZOR hardware wallet. Get yourself a clean, awesome, and I'd say, reliable hardware wallet. I always recommend TREZOR. I'll drop a link for you below, code Bitcoin Hotel. That'll get you another 10% off a TREZOR. That's definitely a solid recommendation. Be sure to check it out, and I'll see you there. See you then. Peace out.